right. Thanks for joining us today. We are here to talk about job interviews. So let me bring in Hisela. Hopefully, you were able to watch our video from last week on our services, but this is really designed to speak about, to have a conversation about a topic that you might need help with or want more information about. And so hopefully, you'll find this helpful to you. Please leave a comment if you have any questions or things to add to the conversation. We want to make sure that this is input from input from everyone. So leave any comments. We're on Facebook Live. We're on YouTube Live. So let's see how we how we do today. Hisela, how are you?
I'm doing good. And by the way, just letting you know, I'm the prom coordinator again. If this is the first time you're watching us on live, uh, I'm the one that gets more to see what is this topic going to be about. I'm the one that gets more involved. Also with JD, it's a fun subject to do, and also because people get so afraid of just saying an interview, But it's more than being that way. It's fun to do that experience when you
Yeah.
get to know all the specific details about it.
Yeah, we can take away some of the mystery and some of the stress about it. So, Hisela, if you wouldn't mind, you have a workshop tomorrow. Would you mind telling them what to anticipate?
Yes, for this workshop, which is express yourself, right? It's to learn how to use your voice, right? To learn how to communicate, learn the different styles that we have, but we use just one more because we're more strong to one specific style, and we always try to stick to only that style instead of using the other ones to be able to adapt to any context that we have in every conversation, right? We're trying to get the message, but also how to receive the message. So it's both ways what we do, what we're going to be speaking on that. So it's going to be more communication skills there that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun, interesting perspective on how people communicate in different ways. So I'm looking forward to participating in that tomorrow. But let's get to the topic of the day. So this week we've posted a video from Indeed about 10 questions that you should ask in an interview. And so we want to talk just generally about interviews and why we have interviews. It's always one of the torturous parts of getting a job is having to go and talk about yourself. Although we're typically our own favorite subject, it is more challenging to talk about ourselves with something on the line, with something at risk. So when we talk about interviewing, when I specifically talk about interview, I always like to frame it, put it in a point of reference. So the whole process of getting hired, of being hired, of winning a job. A lot of us, when we're looking for a job, are looking for a job as quickly as possible. Maybe trying to apply for jobs that we hadn't had before, or even something that's a step up from where we've been. But really, when we're applying for jobs, we may not have a job now. So there's a little bit of pressure to get a new job as soon as possible. But we have to think about it as a process. And so I always back up to what is that process? What is a resume and application really for? What's an interview for in the process of getting hired? And I'm curious if anybody stopped to think about that the resume and the application isn't to get you the job. The resume and application isn't to give them a reason to hire you. That resume and application is really to show that you're worth interviewing, that you would be a good candidate for them. Um, they don't know anything about you. They probably haven't even met you in person. If they have, they met you um, when you handed in the application or by email. So that resume application is really to introduce yourself and let them determine whether you're a good candidate. Gisela, what have has been your experience in completing application or submitting your resume?
Oh, it's a fun part to see because we always think because we make an application, we automatically think we already hired, which that's a big mistake we have, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing we think. Okay, I put the application in, I'm already hired. Then we need to stop and think about it. Okay, what is this application for, and what is going to be applied for,
Right.
right? Because sometimes, like you say, we're so desperate of looking for a job that we just applying for anything that we see, but we
Right.
don't really know what's the whole, because they're always going to show the whole beauty, but there's always behind extra work or something that you have to realize what it's going to take,
Right.
right? The application is just the first step for us so they can see also the resume, right? Because you're highlighting what is the best of you and putting your best foot forward to get that interview.
Right. There's a lot more we could say about resumes and applications and what to put on them and what not to. But to keep in mind that resume and that application is really just to help you get the interview. So if you think of everything as steps, that resume and application is to help you get the interview first and primarily. It's not to get the job, and the process may end up becoming shorter. They may see your resume and application and hire you immediately. But in general, if you think about it and break it down into those steps and make it a little more simple, the resume and the application are really there to help you get the interview. And though then you go to what is the interview for? If resume isn't to get you the job, then what is it? The interview is to help identify whether you're qualified and whether you're a good fit. But even more importantly, it's to help identify whether the business is a good fit for you, if the position is a good fit for you. And so that's the challenge, right? The finding out um, whether you're qualified is why they're calling you in for an interview. They already see that you have the qualifications, but how are you going to fit in with them? How are you going to use those skills and that experience for the benefit of the department, for the position, for the company in any form or fashion? How are you going to do that? So, are you a good fit? And at the same time, we'll get to the next slide here in a second. It's are is the company a good fit for you? Gisela, what was the most challenging part of an interview for you?
That's it. Um, I would say that I was putting all the pressure on myself. I was only thinking that I was supposed to just go there and get people asking me questions. I feel like I wasn't allowed to ask questions, but when I realized it, it's a two-way street. You get more that is stress out of yourself, right?
Right.
Because you go there and you think, oh, okay, I'm getting the interview, so that means they're going to ask me a lot of questions, and I'm supposed to just answer questions instead of thinking in both ways, right? So this job is really going. I'm going to like it. I mean, I have to ask what I'm going to get into, right?
Right.
So it's a two-way street. So you asking questions and also you answering questions for if you really want that job, or you can back off, right? Because just because you get an interview, that doesn't mean you have to accept that job, right? Because
Right.
you haven't get hired yet. Because there can be 10 or 15 more people getting interviewed. They just want to see your skills and what is the best of you they can use for that specific position. So I would say for me, the most hard thing it was just to think that way, thinking it was just, I can't say anything. I just
Yep.
had to answer, right?
Right. Yeah, that's been the hardest thing for me in past interviews is especially as you're being asked questions, it's even difficult to think about what is it that I still need to know. I usually get intimidated by what hasn't been answered and not wanting to ask a question that has already been answered. But getting in that practice of actively participating and that getting a little bit ahead of where we want to go. So we don't want to ruin all the fun for the next slide, but that interview is to get you hired. So that's the time for them to assess, okay, are these skills that I saw on the resume application really there? Can they speak to them? Do they demonstrate that they're the most qualified individual to be hired? And so this is really the context where an interview should be viewed. not in isolation, but as a part of a stepping process. So let's go on to what an interview is and what an interview is not. An interview, let's see, I'm jumping ahead. An interview isn't a one way conversation. It isn't just one person asking questions and one person answering those questions. It should be a conversation of both, each individual determining, is it going to be a good fit? Are Is the relationship going to be worthwhile? Are you the most qualified? And is this the job that you want to do over an extended period of time, whether it's the highest job you ever want to get to, or if it's the next job that makes sense, or if it's a new career? Is this a job that you're going to want to do day in and day out? So it's a conversation. How easy is it to have a conversation with a stranger, Gisela, especially about yourself?
Uh, I would say for myself, it is easy but a hard at the same time. So it's both ways too. Easy because I mean I get to talk to someone that doesn't know about me, so I can kind of tell them, well, I'm this person, right? But the hard thing it's how to say it in a way where they get in the message, right? Because on the interview you can say things on a way that you will be able to get higher, right? So
You
you
want to
need
be
to,
persuasive, right? The pressure's
yes,
on. Yeah,
yeah. So that's I would say that's the hard thing, how to say the things, how to address those answers for the best, and not put it against yourself, right? Because however we answer those questions, can we get potential higher or can we, you know, be on the other side?
right. I think a lot of us forget that if we've if we're going to an interview, that means there's something that the employer liked about our application resume, something that they liked about our experience. And so it's always interesting that the pressure about an interview is I've got to prove that I'm qualified, or I've got to prove that they should hire me, when they already have a reason to consider you because they've invited, they're scheduling time to talk with you for one reason or another. So it's not that you have to prove that you do the job. You got to show how you would do the job. Give them insight into what and how you would do things. So asking questions about the company and the department, what the culture is like, right? If it's a quiet, no one's talking to each other, everybody's just busy. Is that going to fit your style, or is that going to be a place that you're going to have difficulty? Um, I know every situation for me, has had to adapt. There's been some departments where I am working on my own with my own tasks, and I'm just busy trying to get as much done. And there's other times where I'm constantly collaborating, and that works for me. As a matter of fact, I like a mixture of both. I like sometimes where I'm working on my own. I like other times where I'm collaborating. So one extreme to the other may be more challenging for me, but I've also learned to adapt. And so taking the time to assess, would this be a good place for you to work? Um, while they're assessing, would you be a good person to work in their company, for their office, whatever the situation is?
But one of the things to JD they need to be aware to is that when you're in an interview, um, like you say, it's a two-way street, right? Both of them, you have to make it conversational. But it's hard for someone not the thing. It's so hard. The one is getting interviewed, the one is doing the interview, right? Because they think all the pressure is for ourselves, and they don't know that the other person that's getting interviewed them is getting pressure too, right?
Right.
Because they want to know if okay, this person may maybe ask me for things I will be able to give to them yet until
Right.
they show me how they're going to do the work.
Yeah.
So
Could you imagine if you were the person wanting a job, could you imagine having to pick between employers? You have 5 different job offers, which I mean anybody would be blessed by that. But how difficult it would be, and in just in the same way that interviewer, the person doing the interviews, they're potentially talking to 5 to 10 people, and they have the pressure of picking the right person. They have the pressure of finding the person that would best fit. And so I know, being the interviewer, the one hiring, I know it's been just as difficult to prepare and to participate and feel like I'm doing a good job and making the best choice as it has been for me to be the one being interviewed, the interviewee. It's both. It's difficult on both sides, and so if you can make it a conversation, if you can make it um, friendly, if you can make it comfortable, depending on the personality of the person across from you, then that helps the process out. If they can relate with you and talk with you as a stranger as though you were a friend, then you might make yourself stand out from the rest of the candidates, especially if you have some good, engaging questions that show that you're interested.
But that's one of the things we also have to learn is which questions to ask on the interview, because sometimes we get in that doubt, like what should I ask, right? So for them, as the one applying for that, as the one getting interviewed, we had to also learn and be prepared to get those questions right, because we have to have the ability of asking those questions so we can seem that we're really interested on that position. So that's going to make us be more that we really care about the job.
Exactly. Yeah, and having some of those preset questions are really good, especially about the goals and expectations for the position. Not that you need to know everything, but are they expecting some reasonable things out of you in that position? Not that not that just that you're qualified to do it, but what are the expectations are some really good ones. And then I always like to suggest make sure you're asking questions while they're asking you questions. Again, make it a conversation. That way you don't have that awkward, okay, the interviewer is going to ask 10 questions and then I'm going to have my turn to ask 5 to 10 questions, right? That gets awkward, especially because you're processing and you're thinking about things. And it's hard to create a true question at the end of everything. But engage in the conversation and ask for details as you're being asked questions, and that makes it a little more easier so that you're not having to keep up with everything and making sure you're going down a mental list.
One of the things, JD, on the interview, I know you have more experience interviewing people, and I got more of the experience being on the other side, right? Getting interviewed. I would say one of the most questions people ask is how many interviews are you going to be able to get before you get hired?
Yeah. So how many times do you need to interview before you're hired?
Yes.
Yeah. I would expect 1 to 2 interviews. Most likely, you're only going to go through one interview, but always be ready for that second interview, because they may narrow it down to their top 2, or you may have to interview with somebody different. The immediate supervisor interviews you the first time, maybe, and then the department head or the person that oversees the immediate supervisor wants to have a follow up interview to get to know you. It's not as much pressure, but still, if the boss of the boss doesn't enjoy the interview, then that recommendation could weigh heavily. But yeah, expect a follow up. Be prepared to clarify any of your answers or provide additional information, whether it's with the same individual or someone else in the organization. I know when we hired you, it was a 2 step process, and that usually just allows for more information. And I would be encouraged that it's a two interview process as opposed to one. That way you can go and follow up and ask more questions. When I was at Baylor working as an office manager, we and went through the hiring process. I knew the best candidate was one person, but I wasn't real sure that I wanted to hire, whether that was the one I wanted to hire. I didn't really want to hire the other ones. And so I asked her back to clarify to make sure that what I wasn't understanding about some of her answers, because she just wasn't answering the way that made me full confidence. But I brought her back, had a conversation, asked her the questions for clarification, and that helped out a whole lot to make sure that I knew I was hiring the right person from the group of candidates that I have, and ended up being a great fit.
See, I see why you say there, JB. The you ask for clarifications, right? That's why you make the second interview. So, I will make a point there, right? So that's how we need to learn how to say the things. So we answer the question we're getting asked, because sometimes we don't answer what people have asking us, right?
Right.
So that's why it's hard, and they keep asking different in a different way the same question.
Right.
So we need to learn to technically go straight to the point, right? But also make it conversational.
Yeah, they're really looking for information to be able to predict what you would do in their in the workplace, in working for them and with them. And so yeah, that kind of leads into the next bit of what we wanted to talk about. So let's I know we've talked a lot about asking questions, but obviously that is a whole other deal. We do want to kind of touch base on, like Gisela was mentioning, how to answer some of these questions and what things to keep in mind. So here, I don't know if anybody has heard of behavioral questions, but a lot of times an employer wants to know, how would this person behave? What decisions would they make? What actions would they take if I employed them? And that tells them more about who you are and what experience they'll have with you in the workplace, because they already know what your qualification is, what your experience is. So, Isela, have you ever been asked that question? Describe a time when you worked with somebody difficult, or you had a disagreement with with a coworker.
Yes, and I would say that's the hard one to answer. I mean, how to address it. Let's say it that way, right?
Right.
Because you don't want to say that you made a mistake, right? Or that you made something out someone upset, right? Because you always
Right.
want to put your best forward, right?
Right.
So it's hard to answer that question, but we learn to address that, right? Because we tell them that that's our weakness, but we tell them also how we overcoming that weakness, right? That we're working through that weakness. So that's not going to be a problem for them if a situation happens again, right?
Right.
Because I know I'm going to be able how to handle that, because I'm teaching myself how I can deal with it, even though I did it in the past, not what I was expecting, right?
Right. Yeah, this is one of those questions of, okay, which story do I tell, right? Do I want to tell the worst story, or do I want to tell the best story? You don't have to confess your sins at a job interview. Like you were saying, Husela, you want to put your best foot forward. And we've all had bad days, and we have things we've done that we don't want to remember, and aren't typical of who we are. So the first thing is any similar question like this is, you want to pick the best story that reflects the best on you. Um, don't pick the worst one. Don't pick the worst one, that the worst outcome of it. You want to be true. You want to be accurate, but you don't want to tell the worst outcome. You want to tell a story that shows that you are capable. Um, that's where it starts. And then remember, this is asking you to tell a story. Describe a time. If we want to go back to elementary school and practice the different types of literature there are, this is asking you to tell a story. So you want to describe the event, and we'll go through that here briefly. But you want to keep it relevant to that question, to what you're trying. to answer. So make sure you tell a story, but don't get into a story that leads into another story. Keep focused on answering the question that was asked through your story. So it's describing. The first thing is you want to describe the situation or the problem. It doesn't have to be a problem, it just could be a situation. Maybe you didn't do anything to cause the situation, which, if you caused it, that's typically more of a problem, but it's a situation that occurred. Describe, set the scene. Um, it's always a little bit difficult to set the scene when you're asked this question out of the blue. So, Hisela, what would you do before you can formulate an answer?
Well, like you say, you don't have to pick up the worst of you, right? Um, on the situation, you can be involved, right? And not be having all the thing, but just being involved on it, it can give you an experience how to handle things. So
Right.
when you get that little touch in there, you can use that as your advantage, right? Because you were involved, but you know how to get through those things.
Yeah.
So when you realize what was the problem, and then you figure out, okay, this is how it happened, but when I got involved, this how I help them to do it, right?
Right.
So you figure out a way how to fix it, or even though, right? Because sometimes you get involved without even trying to get involved, right? It just
Yeah.
happened to be that way. So that's why it's like now you always want to get the worst of you, but
Yeah.
just try to kind of get a little story about yourself, but when you were involved, instead in when you make that conflict, and it's going to make it even hard for you to answer that question.
Yeah. So hopefully you've thought about some of these stories beforehand. But if you haven't even thought about some of these stories, it's okay to ask, can I have a moment to think about that answer? Because the big part, especially of this first step of describing the situation and problem, is you want to describe it in a way that demonstrates that you're telling a real story, that you're describing a real situation. You don't want to be seen as making up a situation. You want it to be authentic, you want it to be sincere. And so ask for a moment to think about that answer, so that you can have the moment. If you haven't already been prepared for that question, you can have the moment, to remember the events and the series of those events. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to be sincere with that situation and problem. The next step you do is you describe what you did. Here you see what you did, not what the other person did, but what you did to deal with the situation. So you're not focusing in on what other people were doing in the situation. You're focusing in on what you did. You're describing your actions and not so much the others. Now, if it's important to understand the story, great. But you want to be the focus of this description because it's a question about you, not about others. You definitely don't want to critique or criticize anybody else in the situation, because then the interviewer can also interpret, what that means about your personality and who you are. Anything you want to add to that
Uh,
one, Hisela?
yes, when you say it's all about you, yes, it just sounds kind of selfish. What I,
Don't
how
make
I
me start
say,
singing.
but I know. Um, but it is true. When we most of the times when we answer that question, we trying to get blame the other person, right? When we don't supposed to be doing saying that, right?
Right.
We can mention the name of the person, right? But we cannot talk about that person, right? It just you put in a name because I mean it's a person who whatever situation happened, right? So
Right.
you have to mention the person, but you have to put yourself there because you the one is to get they're trying to get higher. So you trying to highlight the best of you, how you handle that thing.
Right.
So you try and kind of brag on yourself and say, okay, I did this, but this is how I solved it, you
Right.
know. So try to brag on yourself a little bit to show that you did your best to fix that situation.
Yeah, you definitely want to highlight you. If that's anything that you get out of this conversation, it's all about you. And I won't sing, I promise, but it's tempting. Um, then the next step is what actions did you take that solved it, right? How did you deal with it? And then what did you do to resolve the issue? Specifically, how did it benefit the company or the office or whatever the situation is? Not how did it benefit you? What did you gain out of it? But what was the benefit to your coworkers, to your boss, to your office, to your business, to your company, or whatever? Because then that shows that you're interested not in yourself, but you're interested in everyone else around you in making the situation better for everyone. So this is all about you, but this isn't a selfish all about you. This is how would they be able to see you in that same situation in their place of work, and what could they expect to make things better for you, your coworkers, your customers, anybody that would be involved in that situation. How are your actions able to pay off for the company? What is your thought process? So that's an example of a behavioral question. There's many more behavioral questions that we practice with our interns and our clients. And so hopefully this is a little bit of a tease of what we've done, what we do. One more tease before we wrap up. Have you ever asked a question, Gisela, that had a question inside of it?
Yes, most of the times, all the questions are that way. It's not what you expect. um, and yeah, like you have on the those questions like
The
they
hidden
come,
questions.
yeah, the hidden question. When they ask you, "Why are you here?" It's like, what do you mean? What am I here for? Right? A lot of
Right,
people, they don't get it because they take it literally. Like, oh, so I'm here because I had to get an interview.
right,
But no, it's a hiding question on that question. So it's something more deep into that question that we
right,
have to think about it before we answer, right? I mean,
right,
it doesn't on the interview, just because you ask the interview, okay, can I get some couple minutes, that means that you're gonna see your ideas and gonna put it in a better way to answer that question, right?
right,
Because sometimes this question get you really quick and you're like, how am I supposed to answer this question? Because the first thing is gonna be so obvious and it's like, well, I'm here for the interview, right?
uh-huh,
But no, they want to know more about what is that you interesting about this job, what is the you really, if you really care about this job, or what is it that got you liking this job, what is something that got interesting.
right. Why do you want to work in that job or for that company? That's really what it's about. They're not interested. They know you need a job, right? No one applies for a job that doesn't need or want a job, whether it's an opportunity for advancement or because they're unemployed. They want to know why you want to work for them. Why do you want to work in that position? Again, you're talking about yourself, but you're talking about yourself in terms of how you can help that employer. So yeah, some of these questions you can't take literal, and that makes a really short interview if you just answer short and sweet and direct. You really need to understand, what are they wanting to get out of me? What's the opportunity? What is the opportunity to be able to tell them something about myself that they wouldn't ask directly? Could I highlight something about myself that I haven't discussed before? And this is again where you want to be prepared and do some practicing and thinking through some potential questions, and have some answers that could be available to you without having to recreate it. Um, are you interested in getting any job, or are you just interested in that job? Are you most interested in that job? As you know, Gisela, many of our interns and even our clients are just looking for any job. But you know
Yes.
what? That employer wants to know that you're wanting their job. And so you need to hone in on, even if you're faking it for the interview, you need to hone in on, this is a job I want, and this is why I want it. That's why I'm here.
Yes.
All right. I didn't plan any fancy closing for this, but Gisela, was there anything that you didn't get to add that you wanted?
No, it just, I mean, we here just to help you through the interview, resumes, all the stuff. I mean, you can come at any time to the Job Resource Center. We can do it in English or in Spanish. We can help you in either language, right? Um, but also don't forget about the workshop, which is going to help you with the interview also because it's communications styles, how to adapt, how to strategies to get involved in a conversational way. But if you have any comments or something, or you want us to be in a specific subject, just tell us and we can make a video about it and then, you know, get some questions and answer some of the questions that you have.
Yeah, let us know what things you're interested in. And if you can come in and we can work with you one on one, we'd prefer to do that. But as we go along, if it's something that would be interesting to several other people, we want to make those resources available and show you some insight into what we're doing, whether you're a supporter of us or whether you're using our services. That's really what all this is for. So you can call us 830-998-6874 with any questions. 830-998-6874. We don't have an 800 number, Gisela. I don't know why I was going there.
I know.
Email director at cjcgc.org or Facebook if you're watching on Facebook right now. YouTube has access to all of our contact information as well. We're happy to help you with any of those needs. We're happy to help any of your friends and family that might need our services. GED, computer skills, all the fun stuff that we could spend all day long talking about. So definitely let us know, and then let's see if we can get another topic going for next week and keep the ball rolling on this high tech stuff. So thanks for joining us. Leave us any comments, ask us any questions, stop by and visit with us anytime, and we'll see you next time.
Thank y'all.